The snow had not let up in 3 days. It fell in thick, unbroken sheets, turning the world into a pale hush. The road was gone, swallowed under drifts. The fences looked like ribs rising from a buried carcass. There was no sky anymore, only a flat white pressing down from above, the kind that weighed on your chest and made the air feel thinner. Trees stood stripped and skeletal, their limbs heavy with ice, creaking like bones. She stood in the doorway of the cabin, her arms around the baby. The others gathered behind her, silent. Their breath made small ghosts in the cold. The boy, the oldest barely 9, had tied the last of the flour into a damp paste and spread it thin across a pan. What crust there was he had given to the youngest. They did not cry anymore, not even when they were hungry. Crying wasted warmth. The woman's name was Ruth. Her boots were cracked and soaked through. Her fingers, wrapped in worn gloves, were stiff and colorless. She had pulled water from the well that morning and her hands had bled where the handle bit into the caluses. She had stitched the baby's blanket from her own underskirt. The petticoat's lace trim still clung to the edge like some cruel reminder of another life. There had been a man once. He left last spring. Said he'd go west for work, maybe get on with the railroad crews, send money when he could. That was the last they heard. Folks said maybe he'd found another woman, or maybe the whiskey got him. Ruth had waited until the letters stopped, until even hope had gone quiet. Yesterday, a pair of men on horseback passed along the ridge. They saw the smoke from her chimney. She stepped out, waving a scarf, shouting for help. The horses paused. One of the men even raised a hand like he might say something. Then they turned and rode on. She watched them disappear into the whiteness, the hoof rips already filling with snow. She went back inside and stirred the fire with a poker, though there was barely enough wood to keep it burning till morning. The girl, 6 years old, sat by the hearth sewing buttons onto a sackcloth doll, her tiny fingers raw and red. Ruth watched her. Something inside her sank further. The world did not care. The world kept turning. Later, when the children were asleep, Ruth sat on the floor beside the fire, the baby swaddled against her chest. The wind howled against the walls. She pressed her cheek to the child's forehead. Her body ached. Her eyes burned. She listened to the cracking of the firewood and the settling of snow on the roof. She didn't pray. She hadn't prayed in years. But she whispered something, maybe not words at all. Just the sound a woman makes when chefs run out of other sounds. Her mouth moved against the baby's temple. The child slept, unaware. A knock came at the door. At first she thought it was the wind. She waited. Then it came again, 3 slow knocks, deliberate. She stood cradling the baby and crossed the floor. The cold radiated from the wooden planks. Her breath trembled. She unlatched the door. A man stood there, his hat crusted with snow, beard stiff with frost. He didn't smile, didn't speak, just looked at her with tired, hollow eyes. A horse stood behind him, steaming in the cold. A pack tied to the saddle. He was from town. She would long known him if he was. His coat was old military, patched at the shoulders, dusted in ice. They stared at each other. Then quietly he said, "You're out here alone?" She nodded. "With my children." He shifted his weight, looked past her shoulder, into the dark behind her. She could smell the iron scent of snow melting on his coat. She felt the heat of the fire at her back. "I got something in the pack," he said. "Flour, salt, dried apples." She said nothing. Her grip on the child tightened. "I can leave it," he added, motioning to his saddle. Was headed south. Just got caught in the weather. She stepped aside. Only a little. Just enough to let the light spill onto the porch. He nodded once and went back to the horse. Inside, the girl stirred. The boy sat up, blinking. Ruth turned her face away from him. Outside, the man untied the pack and slung it over one shoulder. When he stepped in, he stopped just past the threshold. His boots left puddles on the wood. The baby shifted against her chest, but didn't wake. He set the pack down near the hearth. "Thank you," she said, voice low. He looked at her again, this time longer. "You got enough wood?" She shook her head. "They'll bring some from the -2." He disappeared into the white again. She stood there, frozen in place, staring at the spot where he'd been. Her legs trembled. She did not understand what was happening, but something in her chest cracked open, quiet and painful. Something like hope. The woodpile was nearly buried, but he found it. Dug with gloved hands until he struck something solid, then hauled back a handful of frozen logs, one arm cradling them close to his chest. When he stepped inside again, his face was red from the cold, steam rising from the brim of his hat. She had cleared a space by the stove. The children watched him, eyes wide and quiet. He didn't look directly at them, just crouched down and fed the fire, slow and steady. The room warmed inch by inch. He stood and peeled off his coat, shaking out the snow, hanging it near the door. Beneath it his shirt was threadbare at the cuffs, the color long gone from too many winters. He stretched his hands toward the heat and winced as feeling came back into his fingers. The boy moved first, picked up the pack and began untying it. Inside a sack of flour, some dried meat, 2 apples wrapped in a rag. Ruth took the food and turned her back to the room. Her hands moved with practiced rhythm, measuring, kneading, heating the pan, her body knowing what to do even when her mind had gone numb. She didn't ask his name. He didn't ask for hers. That night, the children ate for the first time in 2 days. They fell asleep quickly, warm with food and fire. Ruth sat by the stove, hands folded in her lap, the baby nestled against her. The man sat near the door, back to the wall, his hat pulled low over his face. "You can take the bed," she said quietly. He didn't answer right away. "I'll stay here." She nodded. "All right." Silence settled between them. Not heavy, just real. The kind of silence that came after you buried someone, or watched the sun rise without knowing if you'd make it to the next. Outside, the storm had eased. Snow still fell, but slower now, gentler. The wind had moved on. He didn't sleep. Neither did she. She watched the fire burn low and thought about the letters she kept tucked in the kitchen drawer. The last one he had sent. It said nothing useful, only that he was trying, that he missed them. That was before spring. She hadn't thrown it out. Not yet. At some point near morning, the man spoke. "You're far from town." "We had to be," she said. "The baby was born last harvest. Fever took the neighbors. I thought we'd be safer away." He nodded. "I was wrong," she added quieter. "I don't think so." He didn't explain what he meant. She didn't ask. But the way he said it settled into her, like a seed dropped in winter ground too early to bloom, but present just the same. She watched him as the firelight flickered across his face. His beard wasn't rimmed, a scar tugging at the line of his jaw. Not fresh, long heel. His eyes were a dark, tired color like the bark of a bird tree. She calculated his age. 30 maybe more. "What's your name?" she asked finally. He looked at her. "Callum." She nodded. "Ruth." That was all. They didn't speak again until morning. By then the storm had passed. Sunlight broke through a crack in the wall and turned the frost on the windows to melting beads. The world outside was still, blanketed in white. The kind of still that came after something violent had ended, and something else, something not yet known, was beginning. Callum opened the door. He stood there, looking out, then said, "There's game up in the hills. Rabbit. Elk maybe, if they haven't moved on." She wiped her hands on her scarf. "You hunting?" "He'll try." He turned, paused. "You got a rifle?" She shook her head. He touched the side of his coat. "I'll leave mine with you." She stared at him. "Why?" "In case someone else comes riding." A long silence passed. He shouldered his coat again and stepped outside. The horse stamped the ground, eager to move. Ruth watched from the doorway as Callum disappeared into the trees, his figure shrinking until it was just a dark speck against the white. She waited until she couldn't see him anymore. Then she shut the door. Inside, the children still slept. The baby stirred and let out a sigh. Ruth stood by the stove, one hand resting on the cold metal. Her body swayed slightly from exhaustion, but her eyes stayed open. She did not know if he would return, but she had seen something in him, something she thought the world had forgotten, the decision to stay, if only for a moment, the choice to turn back when it would have been easier to ride on. She had not expected that. And yet, it had happened. Right on into the next chapter. Subscribe now. Callum returned just before dusk. The snow had crusted over during the day, hardened by a sun too weak to melt. He came out of the trees slow, dragging something behind him wrapped in canvas. Blood darkened the snow where he walked. A hair angled from his belt, its fur stiff with frost. Ruth saw him from the window. She didn't open the door right away. Just watch. He moved like a man used to carrying weight not just in his arms but all over, like he'd been doing it a long time. When he stepped inside, his face was raw from wind, beard dusted in ice. He slung the rifle and leaned it against the wall. The girl stared at the bundle he carried, then looked at her mother. Ruth's nod was nearly invisible. Callum set the wrapped carcass down gently. "Young buck," he said. "Thin, but clean." She nodded. "Well, make it last. You'll clean it in the barn," he added. "There's no barn," she said. "Just a shed with a broken roof." He didn't complain. He picked the bundle back up and walked out into the night again. The boy fella. Ruth started boiling water. A baby whimpered in his sleep. The girl rocked him gently. Ruth didn't speak. Her hands moved on their own gathering, peeling, salting what scraps she had left. Later she found the boy standing just inside the doorway, face pale. His boots streaked blood. His eyes didn't meet hers. "Did you help him?" He nodded. "You all right?" Another nod. She didn't press, just handed him a cloth and pointed to his boots. He knelt and wiped the blood away in silence. Callum came in last. He washed his hands in the basin, steam rising as the cold left him. Then he sat with his back to the wall and said nothing. She served us the made from the meat and dried roots. It tasted like survival. That night after the children were asleep, they sat by the fire again. "You teach the boy to gut?" she asked. He nodded. As sharp, brave. She looked at the floor. He had to grow up faster than he should have. Callum didn't answer, just watched the flames crawl along the logs. His eyes weren't the kind that looked away from hard things. He seemed like someone who had learned it early that silence was sometimes a kindness. "Where were you headed?" she asked after a while. "Nowhere in particular. Everyone is headed somewhere." He gave a slow shrug. "Used to be headed west. Then I started going wherever the horse pointed." She nodded. That made more sense than anything else she'd heard in a long time. "Army?" she asked, eyeing the coat again. He looked down at it. "A long time ago. You run from something." He didn't answer right away. "Sometimes you don't run. Sometimes the ground just opens behind you." Her throat tightened at that. She understood more than she wanted to. He took off the coat, folded it beside him. The shirt beneath clung to the shape of someone worn thin. Across one wrist was a pale rope scar, healed but never quite gone. She didn't ask about it. Some stories didn't belong to questions. "Do you plan to stay?" she asked. The words left her lips before she knew they were coming. He looked up, not startled, just quiet. "I don't know," he said. "I don't have anything to give," she said. "No money, no room, not even a full plate most days. I didn't come for any of that." She studied him. The fire lit half his face and left the other in shadow. She thought of the men who had ridden past without stopping, the way they looked at her, then looked away, as if the sight of need was too much to carry. "You could leave tomorrow," she said, softer now. "I could." She waited. He added, "But I won't. Not yet." The wind outside had softened. The house creaked, settling around them like an old friend. Ruth looked over at the children. Their faces were flushed with warmth. For the first time in weeks, their sleep looked deep. She turned back to him. "You can take the bed tonight." He shook his head again. "He'll keep watch by the fire." She nodded, then stood across the room and laid her hand on the back of his chair. Just for a moment. She didn't say anything else. She didn't have to. The days passed in slow inches. Snow softened, then refroze, turning the land to a crusted wasteland that cracked beneath every step. The children learned to move without wasting warmth. The girl helped with stitching, the boy with cutting wood, learning from Callum how to split logs clean and safe. Ruth rose early each morning, stirring ashes back to flame with shaking hands, her breath white in the half-minus dark. Callum stayed. He didn't explain why. He hunted when weather allowed, worked alongside Ruth without asking, fixed the shed roof with scrapped in, reinforced the fence with fallen branches. When he spoke, it was short and low, like words cost something. But he paid attention to the way the baby cried, to how the girl liked her hair braided. to the way Ruth pressed her fingers into her temples when the pain crept behind her eyes. One afternoon, she caught him standing just outside the cabin, staring out over the snow-covered flats. He held a letter in his hands, yellowed and creased. She saw him fold it twice, then again, tucking it into his coat pocket like something half-buried. She didn't ask what it said. Instead, she walked over and said, "There's a cracked window upstairs. Wind keeps getting in." He nodded. "He'll see to it." That was how they spoke through work, through small things. Words passed like bread across a table. No one said what didn't need saying. The fire stayed lit. One morning, Ruth found him in the shed, sanding a board smooth with his bare hands. His knuckles were raw, fingertips cracked. She stood there a long time before asking, "What are you building?" He didn't look up. "A cradle." The word landed like a stone in her chest. "You don't have to. I know." He kept sanding. Ruth felt the weight of it. This man who had come out of the snow, stayed without asking, and now shaped something with his hands just to give her peace. She had lived too long without kindness to believe it didn't come with cost, but she saw no calculation in his face, only tiredness and care. That night she sat beside him near the fire. The baby slept in her lap. The boy dozed with his head on a folded coat. The girl clutched her doll with one hand and the hem of Ruth's skirt with the other. "I used to be someone else," Ruth said. Callum didn't move. "Before all this, before the sickness, before he left, I used to read books and sew proper dresses. I used to believe things would turn out if I just kept trying." Callum stared at the flames. "And now?" "Now I get through the day." He nodded like he understood. "Trying can be a kind of hope, or a kind of punishment. Sometimes both." She looked at him. "Which was it for you?" He didn't answer. "But after a while," he said, "I had a brother, younger than me. He followed me into the army. I told him not to, but he did. Got killed in a place nobody remembers. I'm sorry. I still talk to him sometimes," he said, "when it's quiet." They sat in silence. The fire popped. Outside, the wind had changed again, rising over the ridge like breath held too long. "I don't want to owe you," Ruth said. "You don't. I don't want you to feel trapped here." "I don't." She watched him, searching his face for something false, but found nothing. "Then why do you stay?" she asked. He turned to her, eyes steady. "Because someone should have stopped for you that day in the snow." Her throat closed. She turned her face away, and the tears came not loud, not hard, just enough to blur the room, enough to shake loose the weight in her chest. He didn't touch her, didn't move, just sat there, steady, as if the fire itself had a heartbeat. And for the first time in a long while, Ruth let herself be tired. Spring took its time. It did not arrive all at once, but in slow, stubborn signs, the drip of thaw from the eaves, the smell of wet earth rising beneath the snow, a thin green shoot clawing its way through frost-bitten soil. The wind shifted from cool to merely cold. Birds returned, hesitant and thin. Ruth found herself waking before the dawn again, not out of fear, but from the pull of purpose. The fire no longer died in the night. The children's cheeks were full again, and the baby had begun to laugh, a soft, startled sound that made her heart twist every time. Callum repaired the fence by hand, lifting each post like he meant it. The boy shadowed him, mimicking his steps, asking quiet questions that Callum always answered, no matter how tired he was. The girl had started stringing bits of ribbon along the rafters, bits Ruth didn't even know they still had. Every day, something came back to life. One evening after the meal, Ruth sat out on the porch steps. The air still held the edge of winter, but the sky was changing, less steel, more silver. Callum joined her, wiping his hands on a rag. They watched the field in silence. "You could leave now," she said after a while. "The roads are passable again." He didn't respond. She didn't look at him. "If you're waiting for permission, you've had it since the day you brought me to my door." Callum leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. "What if I'm not looking for roads anymore?" She turned to face him. "What are you looking for then?" He was quiet, the kind of quiet that held weight. "I don't know if I ever had a place of my own," he said finally. "Not really. Just passed through other people's, camped on the edges, fixed what was broken, then moved on. And now, he looked at her, not past her, not through her at her. "I'm tired of moving." She felt the words settle deep like rain into dust. It scared her how much she wanted to believe them. Wanted to believe she was just another stop along a lonely trail. "Do you know what it means," she asked, "to stay?" "Yes," he said. They didn't speak again that night. But when she rose to go inside, he followed. Not as a guest, not as a stranger. That week he built a table with his bare hands, wide enough for all of them. He didn't ask for help. She didn't offer. But when it was done, she ran her fingers along the smooth grain, then set the bread on it with a strange sense of ceremony. The children sat, elbows on the edge, eyes bright. They ate in silence, a silence filled with warmth. Later, Ruth found the letter he had kept, the one he always folded so carefully. It had fallen from his coat when he laid it over the chair. She didn't mean to read it, but the first line caught her. "I hope you found somewhere quieter than this world we were born into." It was signed in a woman's hand. No name, no address, just that one sentence, aching with goodbye. She folded it back the way she had seen him do, perfectly, gently. That night, as they lay in separate corners of the cabin, she whispered, "She mattered to you." "She did. I'm not her. I know." And that was all. The snow was nearly gone when the wagon came. A trader, cutting across the land to sell salt and tools. He brought news from town. Said a man had been asking after Ruth's tall, brown coat, mean voice. Said he looked like trouble. Her stomach clenched. The man had asked about the children too, by name. After the wagon rolled on, she stood in the doorway, arms crossed tight. Callum stepped beside her. "A.T.S. coming," she said. "Let him. You don't know him. I don't need to." A.T.S. their father. Callum didn't flinch. He left them. That matters more. She turned her face to the wind. The baby stirred in her arms. Callum touched her shoulder, not as comfort, not as possession, but as promise. "Well, I'll be ready," he said. For the first time, she believed him. The man came just before sundown. They saw him first from the ridge, his shape small and hunched on horseback, moving slow but sure through the thawed trail. He wore a long coat dark with rain, hat pulled low, and a rifle slung across his saddle. His arrival felt like a storm building, inevitable and unhurried. Ruth didn't say anything. She finished tying back the girl's hair with the last of the blue ribbon, then went outside. Callum stood at the edge of the porch, arms crossed, watching the figure descend. The boy stood behind the doorway, his body rigid. The girl clung to her doll. Even the baby had gone still in Ruth's arms. When the rider reached the clearing, he didn't dismount. Just stopped and looked around, his eyes sweeping the cabin, the shed, the fence, all of it. Then they landed on Ruth. "Well," he said, "you look worse for wear." She said nothing. He looked toward Callum, unimpressed. "That your new man?" Callum didn't move. The rider sniffed and spat. "Figures. You always were too soft to stay alone for long." Ruth stepped forward. "Why are you here?" He shrugged, too casual. "It's still my name they carry, still my house. Thought I'd see what was left of it. Maybe take the kids back where they belong." Ruth held the baby tighter. Her voice was calm. "You left us to starve. I left to work. You lost your nerve. There's a difference. You never sent for us." The man dismounted slowly, brushing snow from his coat. "Don't matter. I'm here now. Things'll be set straight." Callum took one step forward. The man's hand went to his rifle, more habit than threat. "You aiming to be a hero?" "No," Callum said, voice even. "Just not fond of men who abandon children." The man laughed. "You think she didn't ask for this? I left her with food and coin. She burned through both. Always did. Always will." Callum didn't blink. "You're not taking the children. Not your call, soldier." "It is now." Something shifted in the man's face, then something dark and mean. His hand twitched, but Ruth stepped between them. "If you raise that rifle," she said, "you'll be buried where you fall." He stared at her for a long time. Then he looked past her, toward the porch, toward the boy. His face changed just enough to make her stomach turn. "You're soft," he said again. "Always were." She stepped closer, her voice slow now. "Just for him. If you come for them, you'd best come with more than words." He looked at her, saw what the winter had burned away, what the silence had built in her. He saw it in turn. "You'll come begging," he said over his shoulder, "sooner or later." Then he mounted, tugged the reins, and rode back the way he'd come. She watched him disappear into the trees. Callum stood beside her, not touching just there. Inside, the boy came to the door, face pale. "Is he gone?" She nodded. "He won't come back." The boy looked at Callum, then at her. "Will you send us away if he does?" Ruth knelt down. "No, he'll never send you anywhere. This is your home." The boy nodded slowly. "He looks smaller than I remembered." She put her hand on his cheek. "That's because you've grown." That night, they sat at the table Callum had built. The girl said grace for the first time since before the sickness. She didn't use the right words, but no one corrected her. After the meal, Ruth stepped outside. The stars were coming out clearer now, brighter. The wind carried the smell of thawed grass, of something deep beginning again. Callum joined her, hands in his pockets. He didn't speak. She turned to him. "He's not their father anymore." Callum looked at her, quiet. "Not just because of what he did," she added, "but because of who you are, what you've given." He didn't answer right away. Then, softly, "I didn't expect this." "Neither did I." He took something from his coat, an old tin badge, worn and dulled, the star almost rubbed smooth. "This was my brother's," he said. "He wore it till the day he died. Said if you can't fix the world, you can at least stand in front of what's broken." She reached out and closed his hand around it. "You already have." That summer came late and hard. The land shook off winter like a creature rising from sleep, slow, stiff, and sudden. Wildflowers pushed through the thawed ground. The creek filled with melt and hummed like a voice returning. Trees thickened with green, and the wind lost its bite. Life returned in pieces, not all at once. But it returned. So did the work. Callum rebuilt the shed entirely, raising new beams, cutting lumber from deadfall. The boy worked beside him, arms stronger now, feet more sure. Ruth watched from the porch, stitching with the baby sleeping in the crook of her arm. The girl sat in the dirt nearby, drawing figures in the dust with a stick, humming to Leslie. They spoke more now, all of them, but not too much. Their words were like the land, simple, necessary, and rooted. One morning Ruth found Callum in the field, digging fence post holes in the rising heat. He worked shirtless, his skin weathered, the scar on his side pale against his ribs. She walked down with water in a tin pail, then stayed while he drank. Neither spoke at first, just breathed. Then she said, "There's land further up the ridge." "Well, but not too rocky. It'd be good for planting." He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "You thinking of planting?" She nodded. "Corn maybe. Beans. If we're going to stay." He looked at her. "We are." She met his gaze, steady and clear. "Then we'll need more than what we've got." "It'll help." "I know." Later that day she showed him the old wedding ring. It had sat in a box at the back of a drawer for over 6 years. She didn't wear it, not after he left. She had thought of melting it down once, but Callum bring herself to. She held it out now, not offering it, just showing it. "This is what he gave me," she said. Callum studied it, then looked up. "And what do you want now?" Her fingers closed around the ring. "Something new. Not a promise on paper. Not a vow made to keep the church happy. Just a life." His voice was low. "Do you want that with me?" She didn't answer with words. Instead, she reached for his hand. It was rough and warm, calloused in the same places as hers. The children planted a sapling out near the fence that week. A gift from the trader who passed by twice a year, an apple tree, still thin and stubborn. Ruth knelt with them as they placed it in the soil, pressing dirt around its roots, patting it firm. Callum stepped beside her and placed a hand over hers. It was not ceremony, not spectacle, but it was a beginning. In the fall, the baby took his first steps. Wobbly on wide Minas side, he crossed the room between Callum and Ruth, laughing when he reached her arms. The boy carved him a toy horse from pine. The girl painted it with blackberry juice until it stained her hands and her wrists. They held a supper outside that evening. No guests, no music, just food, firelight, and quiet joy. Ruth watched the children chase each other through the field. She listened to Callum laugh low and easy and felt something in her chest settle, like a house long minus abandoned now filled with light. Later she walked out to the tree they deplanted. It stood straighter now, its leaves crisp with the first hints of gold. She pressed her palm to its trunk. Behind her, Callum wrapped an arm around her waist. His chin rested lightly on her shoulder. "You think it'll last?" he asked. She leaned into him. "It already has." The stars came out one by one, not hurried, not loud, just there like truth. And beneath them stood a woman who had once been alone in the snow, a man who had once meant to keep riding, and the pieces of a life they were building steady as breath. The next legend waits. Subscribe now.